있었거든요. 정말 믿기지 않는 그런 신기한 일이었는데 지금도 두고두고 그분에게 어떤 사연이 있는지 물어보지 못한 게 미안하고 되게 후회가 됩니다. 특별한 계획이라기보다는 체력이 되게 이제 좀 한계에 봉착한 그런 느낌이 있어요. 글 쓰는 것에 대해서. 네, 체력이 허락하면 오늘도 쓰고 운이 좋으면 내일도 쓰자 이런 마음을 갖고 있습니다.
Hello, my name is Mark Kim. I'm a former member of the Virginia House of Delegates, and I want to congratulate the Arirang TV on your 30th anniversary. Thank you for the amazing work that you do to educate the Koreans as well as the Korean diaspora. People like me in the United States, we rely on you to tell us what's going on and to learn about what Korean Americans as well as Koreans should be thinking about every day. So thank you for the amazing service that you provide to all of us. And congratulations and happy anniversary.
Party held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang. U.S. officials say President Donald Trump has directed aides to plan for a prolonged blockade of Iran, aiming to choke off the regime's revenue in a high-stakes effort to force Tehran into conceding on its nuclear ambitions. The United Arab Emirates says it will exit OPEC and the wider OPEC Plus alliance on May 1st, a move aimed at advancing its long-term energy strategy and meeting growing global demand, the country says. An appeals court on Wednesday raised former President Yoon's prison term from 5 to 7 years over obstruction of justice and related charges tied to his failed martial law attempt. We start in the U.S., where the Trump administration appears poised to intensify its pressure campaign against Iran, with plans to extend its naval blockade of the country's ports. Our Jo Young-un leads our coverage tonight.
According to the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, Trump recently directed aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iranian ports. Citing U.S. officials, the report said Trump will continue pressuring Iran's economy and oil exports by restricting its ports. Officials said Trump viewed his other options, resuming military strikes or stepping away from the conflict altogether, as carrying greater political and strategic risks. Still, the strategy could prolong a conflict that has already pushed gas prices up, hurt Trump's approval ratings, and raised concerns among Republicans ahead of this year's midterm elections. In a Truth Social post on Tuesday, Trump claimed Iran had told the U.S. it was in a state of collapse, suggesting the current pressure campaign is severely damaging Tehran's economy. A senior U.S. official said Iran is struggling to store unsold oil and has recently reached out to Washington. Meanwhile, Reuters reported that U.S. intelligence agencies are assessing how Iran will respond to a declaration of a unilateral victory by Trump in the ongoing conflict. The report says some administration officials are concerned the war could become a growing political burden for the White House and deepen Republican concerns in the upcoming elections. The intelligence community aims to understand the implication of Trump potentially pulling back, while rapid de-escalation could pose renewed threats to U.S. allies in the region. Adding to the uncertainty, the Financial Times reported the growing divisions within Iran's leadership over whether Tehran should negotiate with Washington over its nuclear program. Iran said the conflict is far from over, with an Iranian military spokesperson saying that Tehran does not consider the conflict to be finished. 조영은, Arirang News.
The United Arab Emirates plans to exit OPEC next May, a move expected to shake global energy markets and weaken the cartel's long-standing grip on oil supply as its third largest producer steps away. Park Jun-han has more.
The United Arab Emirates, one of the world's largest oil suppliers, has decided to leave the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. As of February, the UAE was the group's third largest producer behind Saudi Arabia and Iraq, pumping around 3.6 million barrels of oil per day, roughly 12% of the organization's total output. Its departure is categorically different from previous exits when Qatar left in 2019, Ecuador in 2020, and Angola in 2024. While the previous exit's impact was limited, this time it is not. The UAE has the capacity to produce up to 4.8 million barrels per day and has plans to expand that to 5 million by 2027. But OPEC's quota system limited its output to about 3 to 3.5 million, leaving a lot of potential revenue untapped as it supported Saudi Arabia's strategy of keeping prices high. With no resolution in sight, Abu Dhabi chose the country's long-term strategic and economic vision over OPEC's. According to the BBC, OPEC once controlled 85% of global oil trade in the 1970s, but that figure has fallen to around 50% today. This means the group still holds leverage but no longer has a monopoly. Losing the flexibility to control oil supply will eventually weaken OPEC's ability to respond to price shocks going forward. While other OPEC members are not yet showing signs of following suit, tensions are rising inside the group over Saudi Arabia's dominant decision-making. In the short term, the ongoing disruption in the Strait of Hormuz limits any immediate market impact. However, once stability returns, the UAE's ability to ramp up production freely could put downward pressure on oil prices and further erode OPEC's leverage in a world increasingly turning toward alternative energy sources. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
The commander of U.S. forces here in South Korea has proposed a new comprehensive security network linking Seoul, Tokyo, and Manila. Lee In-jin has more.
The head of U.S. Forces Korea, Army General Xavier Brunson, has outlined a new potential strategy to combine the military capabilities of South Korea, Japan, and possibly the Philippines to create a faster and more flexible network system across land, sea, and air, as well as the space, cyber, and electromagnetic arenas. In an interview with the Japan Times published Tuesday, Brunson said these complementary capabilities have to be linked into a kill web that achieves combined joint all-domain effects. He added that it would enable a more coordinated response to regional security threats from North Korea, China, and Russia. Brunson emphasized that South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, all U.S. alliances, cannot afford to exist in isolation, but connected, the overlapping strengths leave no single axis for an adversary to plan against. Brunson also said the cooperation would fundamentally change how the U.S. and its allies organize in the Indo-Pacific, potentially positioning South Korea at the center as a regional defense hub due to its location and advanced industrial base. Japan would contribute advanced combat and surveillance capabilities and control over key maritime choke points, while the Philippines would provide strategic access linking the Pacific and Indian Oceans. However, most importantly, Commander Brunson highlighted that the kill web only works if every node sees the same picture, especially at a time when modern conflicts are often shaped before conventional fighting begins, requiring even quicker detection and action, as well as trust. Despite all three countries being U.S. allies, such a strategy would not be without challenges, with complex relationships, differences in operational systems, and legal regulations, all barriers that would need to be overcome. 이은진, Arirang News.
Having scrapped its long-standing ban on the export of lethal weapons, Japan has moved to the next stage to revise its three key security documents that outline the nation's defense strategy. And the necessity of acquiring nuclear-powered submarines also came up. Cha Yun-kyung reports.
Tokyo has scrapped its decades-old ban on exporting lethal weapons, aiming to bolster allies as security tensions with China and North Korea intensify. Following this move, the Japanese government has launched discussions to revise three key security-related documents by the end of this year. During the first meeting of an expert panel at the Prime Minister's office in Tokyo, voices emerged calling for a re-examination of the three non-nuclear principles. That is Japan's long-standing national policy of not possessing, producing, or permitting the introduction of nuclear weapons. Some experts also advocated for the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines to secure an ultimate nuclear deterrent. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who has previously expressed openness to reviewing non-nuclear principles, did not directly mention possessing nuclear weapons during the meeting. However, she made it clear that Tokyo would significantly bolster its defense capabilities, stating that the revision of these documents is a crucial task that will determine the fate of Japan. Meanwhile, a sense of distancing from non-nuclear principles was felt as the Japanese government sent a state minister for foreign affairs to read a statement on behalf of the government at the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference at the UN headquarters in New York. In response, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian issued a harsh criticism, questioning whether Japan is speeding down the path of remilitarization to once again become a calamity for East Asia. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Friction over e-commerce giant Coupang may be stalling security talks between Seoul and Washington. We review the recent developments and highlight the crucial issues at hand. For this, we have our correspondent Oh Soo-young in the studio with us. So welcome back, Soo-young.
Lovely to see you this evening.
So Soo-young, let's first start with the latest on how the Coupang dispute has flared up again. I hear the government is considering responding to a letter by U.S. lawmakers, right?
That's right. Last week, 54 U.S. lawmakers sent a letter to Korean ambassador to the U.S. Kang Kyung-ah, calling the scrutiny of Coupang's data leak a whole-of-government assault. And the e-commerce company's data breach last year exposed personal information of around 33.7 million users. That's around 65% of the population. The response in Korea has followed legal and democratic procedures involving data protection officials, police, the Fair Trade Commission, and tax authorities. However, Coupang has been diligently lobbying to visible success in D.C., endorsing its stance that Seoul is unfairly targeting a U.S. company. According to media reports, Washington may have raised the legal treatment of Coupang founder Bum Kim, signaling that this could affect the mood for bilateral security talks. And National Security Advisor Wi Sung-lak, he has since acknowledged the Coupang issue is affecting security consultations, whilst very much stressing that the two should remain separate.
You know, that's the concern, isn't it? I mean, what kind of talks are at stake at the moment?
Well, these are follow-up consultations following last year's bilateral joint fact sheet. Now, this involves cooperation on naval shipbuilding, nuclear-powered submarines, uranium enrichment, and spent fuel reprocessing. For us reporters covering diplomatic affairs in Seoul, these talks should have begun at least 2 months ago and should ideally be progressing with speed, especially at a critical time when Washington's asking its allies to expand defense capacity and also invest in U.S. industries. Now, Korea's ready to be that key partner with a $300 billion investment pledge and the industrial base to support US shipbuilding and nuclear supply chains. In naval shipbuilding, Korea's world-class shipyards offer capacity that the US currently lacks in scale and cooperating in areas like fuel reprocessing. Now, that would give the US a reliable partner to strengthen supply chains and also meet rising energy demands.
So this unlocks a new level of cooperation. It allows and it encourages and works towards less reliance on Russia. I think there's also a significant knock-on effect into the civil nuclear space. Just the fact that we're working more on all things nuclear, I think will also build the natural conversation towards more cooperation on small modular reactors, on traditional reactors, in a space that again represents, over $1 trillion of market over the next 25 years.
Now, the technical discussions are ready to start with between Seoul's top nuclear energy negotiators, Ambassador Im Gap-soo and his deputy Kim Ji-un, and their Washington counterparts.
But I guess this commercial dispute is part of U.S. policy against digital regulation in general, right?
Right. So for Coupang, their issue really coincides with America's greater push to protect its digital regulations, its digital industries. The U.S. has raised similar concerns over digital regulations in the European Union and launched Section 301 investigations into countries like Brazil. Last December, the State Department announced visa restrictions targeting officials accused of pressuring US tech platforms and backing digital regulation in Europe. So this could well demonstrate just how far Washington's prepared to go to prevent rules or any kind of limitations that could hinder the growth of US platforms. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the US digital economy accounted for 10.3% of GDP in 2021, or roughly $2.4 trillion in value added. Now, that is on par with manufacturing, which accounts for about 10.9% of GDP, but has fallen sharply from around 25% in the 1950s to, again, roughly 11% today, alongside a goods trade deficit of more than $1 trillion. So you can see that digital services are America's crown jewel, really globally dominant, but also heavily reliant on overseas markets. Nearly 60% of revenue depends on non-US markets.
That is why for Coupang, this is a timely dispute.
That's right, it very much is, Tammy. I mean, the issue for now, of course, again, coincides with America's move to protect its digital sector. Washington has said that network usage policies create unfair costs, while Seoul says that related legislation has not actually been enacted and that it's ensuring enforcement of laws, including the case of Coupang, is applied equally under domestic law. Now, experts say that commercial issues inevitably do rise time and time again within the alliance, but the bigger picture should really override these kind of short-term bilateral irritants.
It's not just about the security relationship, it's also this technological relationship and this very advanced relationship. That's where we should be heading. To do that, we have to find a way to manage Korea's regulatory evolution, and the U.S. has to understand how Korea works such that they can match that pace and that evolution and profit from it. Really, I mean, it's a win-win.
And well, I have been assured, Tammy, that the alliance itself will remain very much unshaken and forward-looking. But of course, politics does often complicate progress. And well, for those with vested interests, I suppose the question is, is it worth it? Is it worth tying, this isolated corporate case with a completely separate issue that's actually vital to the long-term interests of both countries?
That is a good point. We'll have to continue to watch how the two cases unfold. Thank you for your time tonight, Soo-young.
Always a pleasure to be here.
A day after the appellate verdict for former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, the court today delivered its second instance ruling in the case against former President Yoon Suk-yeol on charges that included the obstruction of his arrest. Our correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
7 years. A special appellate panel at the Seoul High Court dedicated to insurrection-related cases sentenced former President Yoon Suk-yeol to 7 years for obstructing his own arrest and related charges on Wednesday afternoon.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment.
This is more than the first ruling, which was 5 years, but less than what prosecutors had appealed for, which was 10 years. Yoon's defense team stated that they will be appealing. The appellate ruling for Yoon, which began at 3 p.m., was live-streamed, and the verdict was handed down at around 4 p.m. The court cited a range of factors in making the decision: violation of the Presidential Security Act for ordering the deletion of secure phone records, obstruction of martial law declaration documents, abuse of power, and special obstruction of public officials and execution of duties during Yoon's first attempt to block arrest. This marks the first appellate decision tied to allegations surrounding the December 3rd martial law declaration and the inaugural case handled by the court's insurrection-focused division. Former President Yoon Suk-yeol faced multiple charges, including allegedly mobilizing the Presidential Security Service to obstruct the execution of an arrest warrant by the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. He's also accused of convening a flawed meeting ahead of declaring the emergency martial law and drafting the martial law proclamation, destroying it, and ordering the deletion of secure phone call records. In the initial trial held in January, the court sentenced him to 5 years in prison, which the prosecutors from the special counsel appealed, arguing it was too lenient, leading to this appeal. Meanwhile, in a separate case on charges of leading an insurrection, Yoon was sentenced to life imprisonment in February, with the appellate trial currently underway. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Korea's small and medium-sized enterprises posted record exports in the first quarter, driven by the strong demand for cosmetics and semiconductors. The Ministry of SMEs and Startups said on Wednesday that outbound shipments rose 9.1% year-on-year to $29.8 billion, which is the highest ever for a first quarter. Cosmetics exports led the gains, rising by over 20% to $2.18 billion. And setting a new quarterly record. Now, semiconductor shipments also remained strong, surging by more than 50% to $1.13 billion. China retained its position as the top export market, where shipments are rising about 10%. But exports to the U.S. and the Middle East declined, with the Middle East seeing a sharp drop amid the ongoing conflict there. K-pop concerts are delivering a major boost to the Korea's tourism economy. Recent data shows the BTS effect is providing a much-needed boost to the economy, as fans tend to stay longer and spend more compared to the average tourist. Our Jung Hae-rim tells us more.
Global K-pop superstar group BTS has proved its significance in Korea's tourism economy. According to a report released today by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, foreign visitors who traveled to Korea for BTS concerts stayed longer and spent significantly more than the average tourist. Data from the Gwanghwamun Square concert in March shows that foreign visitors stayed an average of 8.7 days, which is 2.9 days longer than the general tourist average of 6.1. Their spending averaged 3.53 million won, or some $2,300 per person, nearly 1.5 times the typical tourist. The impact was seen more concentrated in local neighborhoods. In Daehwa-dong, Goyang, where the band performed earlier this month, the number of foreign visitors skyrocketed 35-fold compared to the same period last year, from about 1,000 to about 48,000. Foreign car transactions climbed from roughly 8.9 million won to over 330 million won, or about $228,000, marking a 38-fold surge compared to the same period a year earlier. Experts attribute this to the BTS The City program, which links the concert venue with landmarks in Seoul's Yongsan and Myeongdong. Instead of just attending a concert, fans are engaging in stay-type tourism, exploring filming locations and museum exhibits. Experts say rising interest in K-culture has turned into an engine, driving a paradigm shift in Korea's tourism industry.
With BTS resuming group activities, global fans are turning their focus back to Korea. We're seeing a massive influx of international tourists whenever these major concerts take place. It's a very positive sign that proves the real-world impact of Korea's cultural assets through hard data.
The government is now taking this blueprint nationwide. To coincide with the upcoming BTS Busan concerts in June, a special welcome week will be held from June 1st to the 15th. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Gyeongbokgung Palace will open its gates for nighttime tours next month, offering visitors a chance to experience Seoul's royal heritage after opening hours. The Cultural Heritage Administration says the evening program will run from May 13th to June 14th, with visitors allowed in from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Major halls, including Gwanghwamun and Gyeonghaeru Pavilion, will be open. Traditional court music performances will also take place on select dates, adding to the nighttime experience. Online reservations will open May 4th at 10 a.m. on Interpark Ticket, with a limit of 3,000 visitors per day. Now, admission is free for visitors wearing traditional hanbok, seniors aged 65 and over, and young children. Curtains have gone up for the 27th Jeonju International Film Festival tonight. Korea's largest showcase of independent films will be on for 10 days, with a total of 237 screen productions from 54 nations. This year, the festival also includes a special program in honor of the late actor An Sung-gi, who passed away this January. A total of 421 films from 70 countries will compete in the international competition section, while 10 films, including 4 documentaries, will compete in the Korean category.
We're continuing to see classic spring weather with big temperature swings. It may feel a bit chilly in the mornings and evenings, but tomorrow highs will climb to around 20 degrees, right near seasonal averages. But with the large temperature swings, be sure to dress in layers. Meanwhile, dry conditions are sticking around. A dry weather advisory has been issued for parts of Seoul, and it remains in place across Chungcheong-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gyeongsang-buk-do regions. So with ongoing wildfire risks, extra caution is definitely needed. On mountainous areas of Jeju Island, light showers less than 5 millimeters are a possibility through early tomorrow morning. And from tomorrow night into early Friday, some rain is expected along the east coast and parts of Gyeongsang-do province. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 9 degrees, Chuncheon at 6 degrees, Busan at 13 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 22 degrees, as will Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Daegu. Looking ahead, warm spring weather will continue throughout the weekend, with rain forecast for southern regions on Sunday.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
Wow. Oh, this is a bidding. 에너지 들어가 있어요. 우와. 맛봐도 돼요? 와우. 와, 색깔이 조금 노란색이에요. 부드러워요. You see? Beautiful little octopus shape. Yes. Perfect. 싹.
The Korean wave is drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% since rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang. Knock knock! The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Kabion by your side, you can become a Kabion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyun. North Korea is once again raising tensions, both through its weapons programs and its strategic moves. A senior U.S. defense official has now warned that Pyongyang's ICBMs can reach the U.S. mainland, renewing focus on advanced missile defense systems like the so-called Golden Dome. At the same time, North Korea continues to push ahead with its nuclear and missile development, even as debate grows over whether denuclearization is still a realistic goal. Meanwhile, Pyongyang is moving closer to Moscow, marking its military involvement in Russia with a new memorial underscoring deepening ties between the two countries. And with potential diplomatic shifts and regional alignments in play, questions are mounting over what North Korea's next move could be. So how should we read these signals, and where is the Korean peninsula headed from here? For answers to this, we are here joined in the studio by Ko Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. A very big welcome, Dr. Go.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Dr. Edward Howell, lecturer on the international relations at the University of Oxford. Good to see you, Dr. Howard.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very good to be here.
So let's start a discussion right away. First with Dr. Go. Let's start with the highlighted statement of the U.S. official on North Korea's ICBM ability to strike the U.S. mainland. And that person stressed the need for systems like the Golden Dome. What is behind this, and what does this actually mean for the security on the peninsula?
Well, I don't think this remarks is coming out of blue. It's been, or in fact, mentioned before. Since last year, United States has been assessing the threat coming from North Korea, and that was, in fact, published in this year's National Defense Strategy from the Department of War. And there, the United States government shared its honest assessment of the level of threat that North Korea represents to the security of the United States. And in fact, for the first time, the United States has qualified North Korea's ICBM capability as an existential threat to the United States homeland. So in that sense, I think it's only natural for the U.S. government official to say that the North Korea's ICBM capability is real. It's very threatening. Therefore, missile defense systems such as the Golden Dome is necessary. In fact, you can read this statement as a way to rationalize the major expenditure that the U.S. government is preparing to build this Golden Dome system. I think the cost outlay just for this year is $24 billion. So, I mean, the United States government, the Trump administration, really has to have a good explanation why it's now investing in this missile defense system that's not only designed to protect the U.S. homeland from Russian and Chinese, but also from North Korea. So I think, and in contrast to Russia and China, North Korea's ICBM threat is in a way more threatening because it's unstable. Also, unlike China and North Korea, China and Russia, North Korea is not engaged with the United States in back-channel dialogue to avoid accidental escalation. So I think this is a more reason or more justification for the Trump administration to justify the construction of this rather controversial missile defense system.
So the level of uncertainty kind of raises the stakes as well. Now, when we look at the broader picture, Dr. Howell, as the government sticks to this phased denuclearization approach, North Korea keeps advancing its nuclear and missile programs day by day. Do you think this approach is still workable?
Thank you. Well, we've got to remind ourselves that a phased denuclearization approach vis-a-vis North Korea is nothing new. It has happened for decades. We've seen it in various iterations across US administrations and across the progressive conservative division in South Korea, across administrations. I mean, the joint statement on the 19th of September 2005 at the six-party talks used the language of commitment, action for action, trying to denuclearize North Korea in a phased manner. And then we all know what happened afterwards. North Korea conducted its first nuclear test in October 2006. So now, over 20 years later, the situation has clearly worsened. And I think that we need to be realistic about just whether North Korea is willing to commit to such a phased approach. In the case of the current Lee Jae-myung government in Seoul, even before Lee Jae-myung made this announcement about the end strategy with respect to a phased North Korean denuclearization, Pyongyang said that it would not accept it. It was part of what Pyongyang called an appeasement offensive on the part of South Korea. And I think the key turning point here was in late 2023, early 2024, when North Korea ruled out the reunification of the Korean Peninsula under its own control as a policy goal. So we're seeing a shift in dynamics between North and South Korea, initiated by North Korea. And I think this is only another factor that makes this phased denuclearization even less likely to take place. That is not to say, however, that the US and South Korea should abandon denuclearization as a goal.
So, but the situation for this phased approach is getting more and more difficult.
Yes, indeed. It's getting more and more difficult, and it's getting harder because North Korea is only getting further away from the pursuit of denuclearization. Recent statements by Kim Jong-un at the Ninth Party Congress, for instance, made clear how in his view North Korea is a nuclear-armed state and wants to be treated as such.
Right, and of course, North Korea's ties with Russia, it's also playing a big role into this current situation. In fact, North Korea marked the anniversary of what it calls this liberation of Kursk with a memorial of troops sent to Russia. What message do you think is Pyongyang sending here?
Well, there are two messages here. So one is internal. Clearly, Kim Jong-un wants to show to the people of North Korea that there's been a major sacrifice done by the North Korean soldiers in the service of the regime. And that's why he's commemorating with the major monument to the death of the soldiers who fought alongside the Russians in Kursk region. But also sort of a message to the Russians that it's a major political signifier for the regime. And whenever the Russian dignitaries come to Pyongyang for a visit, this spot is going to be a must site for the Russian officials to pay a visit to, because this is going to be a way for the North Koreans and the Russians to reaffirm their firm bond over the fight against Ukraine. So there are these kind of two messages, but also there's a self-serving message in between the lines here. So Kim Jong-un clearly deems his intervention in Kursk for the Russians as a major achievement for the regime. Otherwise, he would not publicize this, because the scale of the death by the North Korean soldiers in the Kursk battleground has been pretty tremendous. With the revealing of this monument for the first time, we have a confirmation of how many deaths the North Korean military suffered in Russia, and it's in the order of about 2,200. So that's a major death ratio, given that it's believed that North Koreans, or the number of North Korean soldiers who've been sent to Russia has been around 10,000. So it's a 22% casualty rate, which is tremendous in the modern warfare. But then at the same time, despite the scale of death, clearly Kim Jong-un thinks that this has been a strategic success for North Korea, because with this intervention, North Korea has been able to stand shoulder to shoulder with major powers such as Russia and China, as evidenced by last year's Victory Day parade in Beijing in September, where Kim Jong-un was standing alongside Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and at the podium. So the major sacrifice paid by the North Korean military and North Korea's young men was well worth it. And this is the only reason why Kim Jong-un is making this into a major piece in his propaganda machine.
Right, so this commemoration, it really kind of reinforced the strengthened relationship between the two. Now, staying on that, Dr. Howell, reports say Russia, it's really getting ready to formalize a long-term military cooperation plan with North Korea. How far do you think this kind of partnership between the two could go?
Thank you. I mean, we had the visit of Belousov, the Russian defense minister, to Pyongyang only a couple of days ago, making this announcement. And it's still in the early stages with respect to what precisely this would involve. What we can say, and I agree with Dr. Go's points here with respect to the domestic and international signaling on the part of North Korea, what we can say is that if we go back to the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty signed on the 19th of June 2024, we expect to see growing economic, political and security cooperation between North Korea and Russia, particularly in terms of the exchange of materials. If the Ukraine war continues, North Korea will look to continue to supply munitions to Russia, and in return gain missile and military technology about which we don't know very much at the moment. But I think it's safe to say that any second-tier Russian technology that North Korea obtains will be far superior to the Soviet legacy systems that North Korea has. I'm talking about, say, reconnaissance satellites, just as one example. I mean, there are lots of other forms of technology that we're seeing here. And I think on this point, what this announcement with respect to the military cooperation up until 2031 that Belousov made highlights is that actually the North Korea-Russia relationship might change even if the Ukraine war ends, but it's here to stay. And I think this is a very important point. It's a point that I make in my forthcoming book, A New Axis of Upheaval, in which we see that actually North Korea and Russia might have started out as a transaction, but it's moving to a much more longer-term relationship. And this was already outlined in the 2024 treaty. So I think we look to see heightened cooperation in the security domain, but also we must also look beyond the security domain. Areas such as artificial intelligence, information technology, research and development, amongst others.
Right, definitely. And when we look beyond just North Korea and Russia ties, their cooperation with China, of course, is also seen as increasingly large, and also with Iran, of course. How should the U.S., South Korea, and their allies respond to this axis?
Well, I think the United States, South Korea, and other allies and partners are already acting on this. Clearly, there are some disagreements over how strong the ties are between the countries of the axis of upheaval, as Dr. Howell well described. And also we know that some of these countries are very self-interested and paranoid about others. There's not clearly like a strong trust between China and North Korea, but then there's also historical ties and relational convenience that are reinforcing the ties between these two countries. And Iran is right now under huge, tremendous pressure from the United States, so it's now unable to contribute so much to the strengthening of these ties with China, Russia, North Korea. So I think the centerpiece here is really the central axis in this so-called axis of upheaval. I would say it's the tie between Russia and North Korea. I think this is a fundamental development, and the axis of upheaval, because China has a little bit of different interest from Russia and North Korea in the sense that China still sees interest in maintaining some aspects of the international order, the rule-based order, especially in the economic domain, because it's convenient for the country. But then not so much with Russia and North Korea. And this is a major concern for a country like the United States, South Korea, and Japan especially, because I think going back to the first question on the necessity for a missile defense system such as Golden Dome, is because I think the United States is concerned that Russia and North Korea are not only like cooperating on the conventional domain, such as the battleground in Kursk, or exchanging military technologies for the conventional weapons, but there's a growing possibility that Russia and North Korea might share strategic technologies. And North Korea has hinted at this by revealing a nuclear power submarine, which is in development, hopefully, remains in development, hopefully, in the last year's Christmas Eve, which the only source of technology that could be is probably from Russia, even though it's a second-tier technology that Russia had developed a long time ago. Nonetheless, it's a technology that North Korea didn't have before. So I think the North Korea is presenting a renewed threat profile that the United States, South Korea, and Japan hadn't seen before, and that's only thanks to its growing ties with Russia. So I think when it comes to the so-called axis of upheaval, or CRINC, I think we should pay special attention to the development of ties between Moscow and Pyongyang.
More focus on there. But when we turn to what's ahead, they're saying that Kim Jong-un could visit Russia around Victory Day on May 9th. Dr. Howell, if that actually happens ahead of the U.S.-China summit, what kind of impact could it have on the region?
I think, firstly, in terms of the United States, this would really put Trump and Xi Jinping into a situation in which Trump would be forced to bring up the issue of North Korea, if expected, if he doesn't bring it up already, as he will most likely do. We saw the visit of and the meeting between Wang Yi and Kim Jong-un only recently, in which China and North Korea reaffirmed their ties. I think a possible visit of Kim Jong-un to Russia, again, we cannot rule it out, will actually make China seek to perhaps say to the US, well, how do we try and maintain stability in the region? We've got to remember that China's main priority is stability with respect to the Korean Peninsula. China has been very quiet and revealed little about its own views on the North Korea-Russia relationship. This, to me, is a very deliberate strategy on the part of Beijing. We know that Beijing is still helping Pyongyang in sanctions evasion. Beijing is still supplying dual-use technologies to Moscow as a core enabler of Russia's war. Again, Beijing's role in all of this will likely feature in any discussions between President Trump and Xi Jinping. And I think that we need to remember that the broader purpose, as Dr. Go mentioned, of this important alliance, and Russia does call it an alliance now between Russia and North Korea, is to undermine the US's leadership of the post-war international order and the US's alliances. And this will likely force Donald Trump, who himself has been trying to grapple with questions of the US's own alliances in East Asia, to talk to Xi Jinping about this network of alliances, particularly the US, South Korea, and the US, Japan. And on this will be something that's very important to watch out for.
Right, the context and the timing as well, it would be definitely significant. Now, when we turn internally into North Korea, Dr. Go, Kim Jong-un recently stressed ideology, lineage, and roots in a military event. Why do you think he's emphasizing these kinds of messages?
So, first of all, we have to explain what North Korea's People's Revolutionary Army is. It's a little bit different. I mean, it's not the army that still exists. It's in fact, it's deemed to be the precursor to the Korean People's Army that exists now. The Korean People's Revolutionary Army essentially refers to the band of guerrillas that fought against the Japanese under the leadership of the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, in the early 1900s. So in that sense, it's more of a mythical, symbolic commemoration, because it's also clear whether North Korea's People's Revolutionary Army ever existed. Maybe existed under a different name, but then it's more of an apocryphal kind of a description of the guerrilla fighters that Kim Il-sung led against Japanese imperialism, and especially in the Manchuria region. So the reason why I think Kim Jong-un is mentioning the lineage and roots, given the context, is because I believe Kim Jong-un is trying to institutionalize the myth that primarily surrounds him and his lineage, that starts from his grandfather, the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, but tie more to the history, the now long history of North Korea's military. Even though a lot of experts believe the origin of the North Korea's People's Revolutionary Army is fictitious, it's part of the propaganda campaign, the long-standing propaganda campaign by the regime. Nonetheless, it imbues the North Korean military with a symbolic background that ties the present posture or struggle against the United States and its allies to the glorified past of struggle against the Japanese imperialism. So I think that's what Kim Jong-un is referring to when he uses a term such as lineage and root.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we kind of look ahead, there's speculation that U.S. President Donald Trump, he could turn to North Korea as his next diplomatic focus. Dr. Howell, could summit diplomacy be used for domestic politics ahead of the midterms?
So this is the million-dollar question, so to speak. And, this comes at a very important time. Just to go back to one of the previous questions, we're now seeing not just individual threats from North Korea, Russia, China, or Iran, of course. We're seeing a collective common threat that makes it even more complicated for the United States, because the United States now has not just these actors individually trying to target the US, but a broad collective. In that respect, therefore, we need to remember that things have changed also for this idea of US DPRK diplomacy. Under the first Trump administration, it very much was diplomacy between the US and North Korea. Under the second Trump administration, I very much think it's very much Trump-Kim diplomacy between the two leaders themselves, rather than broader coalitions within, at least in the US government. Now, is this likely to happen, and what might this mean? I think we cannot rule it out, but we must remember Trump tried to meet Kim Jong-un, at least from the reports that we saw last October 2025, during his tour of East Asia at the time of the OPEC summit, and a meeting did not materialize. I think that we need to remind ourselves of two possibilities. First, Kim Jong-un is at his most emboldened now, in my view. He wants to consolidate power. He wants to leave his legacy on North Korea. He wants North Korea to be a nuclear-armed state, as he always has done. He now has Russia's support, so quite plausibly, he could deny Trump a meeting. But secondly, knowing he has all of these things, he could plausibly meet Trump and give no concessions and try and get some kind of, albeit tacit, implicit acceptance of North Korea as a nuclear-armed state, and that would be a victory for Kim Jong-un. For Trump, however, does this carry domestic value? I think if Trump can try and shift the narrative and say, okay, the Venezuela is over, Iran is over, Iran has won. The US has won over Iran, as he mentioned in his speech earlier, a few hours ago, in front of King Charles III of the UK. He could shift the narrative on North Korea. The question is, though, that the US is still prioritizing China, at least deterring China economically, over North Korea. And we wait to see whether that shift towards North Korea as a priority and how that evolves.
Right, so we'll have to see how this individual diplomacy between President Trump and Kim Jong-un would evolve in the coming months. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Howell.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation.
And of course, Dr. Go, we really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.